Dr. Kethvar walked through the long white hallway of his research ship. His 4 eyes moved from screen to screen, checking the data from his experiments. The ship was called Serenity's Edge, and it was the most advanced research vessel the Galactic Council owned. Kethvar was proud to work here. He was studying how different young creatures behaved when separated from their families. The lab was huge and clean. Hundreds of glass boxes lined the walls, each one holding a young creature from somewhere in the galaxy. Some boxes held small blue beings that made musical sounds. Others contained fuzzy creatures with 6 legs that liked to dig. Each species was different, and Kethvar carefully wrote down everything he saw. But today he was most interested in the newest arrivals. In the far corner of the lab, 12 glass boxes held something very special. Human children Kethvar had heard about humans before. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, far from the center of the galaxy. Most council members thought humans were not very smart. They fought each other often and had only just learned to travel between stars. But Kethvar found them interesting because they showed strong emotions. The 12 human children had been brought to his ship 3 weeks ago. His collection team had taken them from a human settlement called New Eden. The humans there had tried to fight back, but the council's weapons were much better. The children were between 6 and 14 years old, which Kethvar knew was young for humans. He stopped in front of the first box. Inside, a small human female with yellow hair sat in the corner. She had been crying again. Her eyes were red and water still ran down her face. Kethvar made a note on his tablet. The young humans cried much more than other species. Most alien children stopped crying after a few days in the boxes. These humans had been crying for 3 weeks. Interesting, Kethvar said to himself. His voice made a clicking sound that humans could not make. Very interesting. In the next box, a human male with dark skin pressed his hands against the glass. He was about 10 years old. When he saw Kethvar, he started hitting the glass with his small fists. "Let us out," the boy shouted. "We want to go home." Kethvar watched the boy hit the glass until his hands turned red. The glass was very strong and would not break. After a few minutes, the boy sat down and put his head in his hands. This was another strange thing about humans. They never stopped trying to escape even when it was impossible. The scientist moved to the third box. This one held a human female who looked about 14 years old. She had red hair and green eyes. Unlike the others, she was not crying or hitting the glass. She was sitting very still, watching everything around her. Kethvar liked to study her because she seemed to be thinking all the time. "What do you want from us?" the girl asked when she saw him. "I am studying how your species behaves," Kethvar replied. He always answered their questions. It was part of the experiment. "You are helping us understand humans better." "We're not animals," the girl said. Her voice was quiet but angry. "We're people. We have families who love us," Kethvar made another note. Humans often talked about love. He did not understand this word very well. His own species did not have strong feelings about their young. When Kethvar was born, his parents had fed him for a few weeks and then left him to live on his own. This was normal and good, but humans seemed to need their families for many years. The young ones in his lab kept calling for their mothers and fathers. Some of them even called for people who were not related to them. Kethvar found this very strange. He walked past more boxes. In each one, a human child sat alone. Some were sleeping. Others stared at the walls. A few were still crying. But Kethvar noticed something odd. Even though the children were in separate boxes, they seemed to be communicating. The boy with dark skin would tap on his glass wall. The girl with red hair would tap back in the same pattern. Then another child would join in. Soon all 12 boxes were filled with the sound of tapping. It was like they were talking to each other in a code. "Stop that noise," Kethvar said, but the children did not listen. They kept tapping until he turned on a sound that hurt their ears. Only then did they stop. This behavior was not normal. Other young creatures in his lab stayed quiet when separated from their families. They accepted their new situation after a few days. But these humans seemed to be getting more upset as time passed, not less. Kethvar walked to his office at the end of the lab. The walls were covered with screens showing data from all his experiments. Numbers and charts told him how much each creature ate, how much they slept, and how often they made sounds. But the human data was different from everything else. He sat down at his desk and looked at the reports. Human children ate less food when they were sad. They slept badly and often had bad dreams. They got sick more often than other species. This was not what Kethvar expected. Most creatures were healthier in his lab than in the wild. They got regular food, clean water, and protection from predators. But the humans seemed to be getting worse every day. His assistant, Dr. Yilneth, came into the office. She was from the same species as Kethvar, with gray skin and 4 arms. "Doctor," she said, "we are getting some strange readings from our sensors." "What kind of readings?" Kethvar asked. "There might be a ship following us through hyperspace, but it is staying far away, so we cannot be sure." Kethvar was not worried. The Serenity's Edge was a council ship. No one would dare attack them. Besides, they were in empty space, far from any planets or trade routes. "Keep watching," he told his assistant. "But do not worry. No one knows where we are." After Yilneth left, Kethvar returned to his data. He was particularly interested in one behavior he had never seen before. When the human children were given food, the older ones would save some of their portions. At first, Kethvar thought they were not hungry. But then he noticed they were trying to share food with the younger children in nearby boxes. The boxes were designed so creatures could not pass objects between them. But the humans kept trying anyway. They would push food toward the glass walls as if hoping it would somehow reach the other children. "Completely illogical," Kethvar muttered. "They are weakening themselves to help others who cannot help them back." He made more notes about this strange behavior. In his species, sharing food with non-relatives was considered stupid. Food was precious, and everyone needed to take care of themselves first. But these humans seemed to care more about others than themselves. As the day ended, Kethvar did his final check of the lab. The human children were settling down for sleep, but they were still tapping their codes on the glass. Even in the dark, they were trying to communicate with each other. One of the youngest humans, a boy about 6 years old, was crying again. He kept saying "Mama" over and over. The sound made some of the other children start crying too. Soon, half the boxes were filled with the sound of crying humans. Kethvar turned on the noise that made them stop, but he felt strange about it. For the first time since starting this experiment, he wondered if he was missing something important about these creatures. Outside the ship, sensors detected something moving in the darkness of space, but the readings were too faint to be sure what it was. The Serenity's Edge continued on its path, carrying its cargo of stolen children toward an uncertain fate. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the ruins of New Eden Colony. Smoke still rose from the destroyed buildings. Bodies lay scattered in the streets. But the worst part was the silence. No children's voices, no laughter, no crying. Just empty playgrounds and broken toys. Sarah walked through the main street with her crew. Her boots crunched on broken glass. The Retribution sat in the landing area, its engines still warm from the emergency jump to this system. Sarah had received a distress signal 2 days ago. She wished she had arrived sooner. "Captain," called Martinez, her second in command. "I found survivors." Sarah followed him to a damaged community center. Inside, about 30 adults sat together. Most of them were hurt. All of them looked broken. When they saw Sarah's uniform, some started crying again. An older woman with gray hair stood up. Her name was Helen Morrison, and she had been the colony's teacher. "Are you from Earth?" Helen asked. Her voice shook with hope. "No," Sarah said gently. "I'm from the merchant fleet, but I'm human and I'm here to help." Helen's face fell. "They took our children. All of them. The ones between 6 and 14. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Who took them?" "Aliens," said a man with a bandaged arm. "They said they were from something called the Galactic Council. They had weapons we couldn't fight. They stunned everyone and took the kids." Helen pulled out a broken tablet. On the screen was a picture of 12 children standing together at a school event. They were smiling and laughing. "These are the ones they took," Helen whispered. "My grandson Tommy is only 6. He still sleeps with his stuffed bear." Sarah studied each face on the screen. She memorized their names: Tommy, Emma, Jake, Lisa, Marcus, Anna, David, Sophie, Ryan, Chloe, Nathan, and Zoe. 12 children who should be playing and learning, not sitting in some alien laboratory. "Did you see which direction their ship went?" Sarah asked. "Yes," said another survivor. "They headed toward the galactic core. But Captain, they had technology we've never seen. How can you possibly catch them?" Sarah looked around at the broken families. These people had lost everything that mattered to them. She thought about her own daughter, who had died in a mining accident 5 years ago. The pain in these parents' eyes was the same pain that still woke her up at night. "I'll find them," Sarah said. It was not a promise. It was a fact. Sarah returned to her ship and called her crew together. The Retribution was supposed to be a cargo hauler, but Sarah had made some changes over the years. Hidden weapon systems, military-grade shields, and a few other surprises that weren't exactly legal. "Listen up," she told her crew of 8. "Those alien bastards took human children. 12 kids, aged 6 to 14. They're probably being experimented on right now." Her crew looked angry. Most of them had families back on human worlds. The idea of children being taken by aliens made them sick. "What's the plan, Captain?" asked Torres, the weapons specialist. "We're going hunting," Sarah said. "But first we need to upgrade this ship for war." Over the next 18 hours, Sarah worked miracles. She called in favors from old military contacts. She bought illegal weapons from smugglers. She even convinced a few retired soldiers to join her crew temporarily. Dr. Kim, the ship's medic, installed medical equipment for treating traumatized children. Engineer Patel reinforced the cargo holds to become safe spaces. Chef Rodriguez stocked up on foods that human children would find comforting. But the most important addition was Lieutenant Commander Jackson, Sarah's old Special Forces partner. He arrived with a team of 6 former soldiers, all volunteers. They brought serious military hardware and years of experience rescuing hostages. "Sarah," Jackson said when he boarded, "this is going to be dangerous. These council aliens have technology we don't understand." "I don't care," Sarah replied. "They made one mistake. They hurt human children. That means they're going to learn what happens when you threaten our young." The hardest part was tracking the alien ship. Human technology was good, but not as advanced as the Galactic Council's. However, Sarah had one advantage. She thought like a soldier, not a scientist. "They'll want to study the children in a controlled environment," she told her crew. "That means they'll go somewhere isolated, away from busy space lanes." Using old star charts and navigation data, Sarah plotted the most likely courses the alien ship could have taken. There were 3 possible routes through empty space toward the galactic core. Sarah split her search pattern. She sent out sensor drones to check each route while the Retribution followed the most likely path. For 2 days they found nothing. Then on the 3rd day, one of the drones detected something. "Captain," called the sensor operator. "Drone 7 found energy signatures matching Council technology. Distance 47 light hours." Sarah felt her heart start beating faster. "Are you sure?" "Positive. It's a large ship moving slowly. The energy pattern matches what the survivors described." Sarah looked at her crew. These people had volunteered to help rescue children they had never met. They were risking their lives because it was the right thing to do. "All hands prepare for combat," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "We found the bastards who took our children." As the Retribution jumped to hyperspace, Sarah thought about what they would find. She had seen alien ships before, but never one designed for research. She didn't know what kind of defenses it would have or how many crew members were aboard, but she knew one thing for certain. Those children had been away from their families for almost a week. Every hour that passed made their trauma worse. Every day in captivity damaged them more. Sarah had failed to save her own daughter. She would not fail to save these 12 children. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system. Immediately, their sensors detected the alien ship. It was huge, almost 3 times the size of Sarah's vessel. Its hull was white and smooth with no visible weapons. "It looks like a flying laboratory," Jackson observed. "Good," Sarah said. "Scientists aren't usually prepared for a fight." She opened a communication channel to the alien ship. The response came quickly. An alien face appeared on the screen. It had gray skin, 4 eyes, and a mouthful of sharp teeth. "This is Dr. Kethvar of the Galactic Council research vessel Serenity's Edge," the alien said. "You are in restricted space. Please leave immediately." Sarah looked directly into the alien's 4 eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Retribution. You have 12 human children aboard your ship. Return them immediately and we might let you live." Dr. Kethvar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human, you do not understand. These children are subjects in a vital scientific study. They are perfectly safe and well cared for. Your emotional reaction is unnecessary." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. This alien was talking about children like they were laboratory animals. "Doctor," she said quietly, You have exactly 10 minutes to return those children. If you don't, I'm going to board your ship and take them back. And anyone who gets in my way is going to die." The alien's four eyes widened. "You cannot threaten a council vessel. We are protected by galactic law." Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "Doctor, I don't care about your laws. You caged human children. Do you even understand what you've done?" She cut the communication channel and turned to her crew. "Battle stations," Sarah ordered. "We're going to war." Dr. Kethavar stared at the communication screen where the human face had been. The female called Sarah Chen had cut their connection, but her words still echoed in his mind. Her eyes had looked like those of a predator, and her voice had promised violence. "Dr. Yilneth," he called to his assistant. "Contact Council Command. Tell them we have a hostile human vessel threatening our research." "Yes, Doctor," Yilneth replied, but she looked nervous. "Should we prepare to jump to hyperspace?" Kethavar considered this. The Serenity's Edge was a research vessel, not a warship. It had shields and some defensive weapons, but nothing designed for real combat. However, the human ship looked old and small. Surely it could not threaten a council vessel. No, he decided. We will not run from a primitive human ship. Raise shields and prepare defensive systems. On the Retribution, Sarah Chen watched the alien ship's energy signatures change. "They're powering up shields," reported the sensor operator. "Good," Sarah said. "That means they're scared." She turned to her weapons officer. "Torres, target their engines. I want them disabled, not destroyed. There are children on that ship." "Aye, Captain. Weapons ready. Jackson, get your team ready for boarding. We're going in fast and hard." Lieutenant Commander Jackson nodded. His 6 soldiers were already suited up in combat armor. Each man carried weapons designed for close combat inside a ship. They had practiced this kind of rescue mission many times during the war. "Remember," Jackson told his team, "children first, everyone else second. We're not here to kill aliens unless they get in our way." Sarah opened the communication channel again. Dr. Kethavar's face appeared, looking more nervous than before. "Doctor," Sarah said, "this is your last chance. Send the children over in a shuttle and we'll leave you alone." "Impossible," Kethavar replied. "The research is too important. These subjects are providing valuable data about human emotional responses to separation stress." Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. This alien was talking about traumatized children like they were numbers on a chart. "Separation stress," she repeated. "You mean you're torturing children to see how much pain they can take?" "We are conducting scientific research," Kethavar said stiffly. "The subjects are fed regularly and kept in clean environments. Their physical needs are met. What about their emotional needs?" Sarah demanded. "What about their need for love and comfort and safety?" Kethavar looked confused. "These are unnecessary requirements. Young creatures only need food, water, and shelter." Sarah realized she was talking to someone who could not understand the most basic human emotions. This alien had no idea what he was doing to those children. "Torres," she said quietly. "Fire." The Retribution's weapons struck the research ship's engines with perfect accuracy. The alien vessel shuddered and began to drift. Its shields flickered and died. "Direct hit, Captain," Torres reported. "Their engines are offline and shields are down." Dr. Kethavar's image on the screen showed panic. "You attacked a council vessel. This is an act of war." "No," Sarah said. "This is a rescue mission. Jackson, go get our children." The boarding shuttle launched from the Retribution with Jackson's team inside. Within minutes, they had cut through the research ship's hull and entered its corridors. The inside of the Serenity's Edge was bright white and sterile. Everything looked clean and scientific. Jackson's team moved through the hallways like hunting wolves, their weapons ready. They encountered the first alien crew members near the research labs. Most of them were scientists, not soldiers. When they saw armed humans, they ran or hid behind equipment. "Where are the human children?" Jackson demanded, grabbing one of the aliens. The creature pointed toward a large door at the end of the corridor. Jackson's team rushed toward it, their hearts pounding. Dr. Kethavar tried to stop them at the laboratory entrance. "You cannot enter here. This is a restricted research area." Jackson looked at the alien scientist with contempt. "Get out of our way, or we'll move you." Kethavar stepped aside, finally understanding that these humans were serious about using violence. The laboratory door opened, and Jackson's team entered a nightmare. The room was huge and filled with hundreds of glass boxes. Inside each box was a young creature from somewhere in the galaxy. Some were crying. Others sat motionless, All of them looked scared and alone, but Jackson only cared about 12 specific boxes. He found them in the far corner. 12 human children, each one trapped in a separate glass cage. When they saw the soldiers, the younger ones started crying with relief. The older ones stood up and pressed against the glass. "Are you here to take us home?" asked a girl with red hair. Jackson recognized her from the photos. This was Lisa, age 14. "Yes," Jackson said, his voice gentle despite his anger. "We're here to take all of you home." The soldiers quickly figured out how to open the glass boxes. As each child was freed, they ran to the soldiers like they were family. Jackson knelt down as a small boy with dark hair threw his arms around his neck. "Are you my daddy?" the boy asked. "No, son," Jackson said softly, "but I'm going to get you back to your real daddy." This was Tommy, the 6-year-old with the stuffed bear. Jackson looked around the box and found the bear in the corner. It was dirty and torn, but Tommy hugged it tight when Jackson gave it back to him. As the children were freed, Jackson noticed something that made him even angrier. The older children immediately went to comfort the younger ones. Emma, who was 8, took Tommy's hand and started talking to him in a soothing voice. Marcus, age 12, picked up little Zoe and carried her. These children had been taking care of each other for a whole week, even while trapped in separate boxes. But then Jackson saw something that changed everything. As his team gathered the human children, the kids kept looking at the other boxes. Hundreds of alien children were still trapped, and the human kids were refusing to leave. "We can't go without them," Lisa said firmly. "They're scared too." Jackson looked around the laboratory. Creatures he had never seen before sat in glass boxes, all of them young, all of them alone. Some looked like fuzzy balls with eyes. Others were long and thin like snakes. All of them looked terrified. "Lisa," Jackson said carefully, "these aren't human children. They're aliens." "So?" Emma said, still holding Tommy's hand. "They're still kids. They still want their moms and dads." Dr. Kethvar, who had been watching from the doorway, spoke up. "Those subjects belong to different species. Many of them are naturally solitary. They do not form emotional attachments like humans do." Lisa turned to look at the alien scientist with fire in her young eyes. "That's not true. We've been talking to them for days. They're all sad and scared just like us." Jackson was confused. "How have you been talking to them?" "You don't speak their languages." "We made up codes," Marcus explained. "Tapping sounds, hand signals, facial expressions. We figured out ways to communicate." Jackson looked more closely at the alien children. Sure enough, many of them were pressing against their glass walls, reaching toward the human children. They had somehow formed bonds across species lines. Dr. Kethvar made a sound of disbelief. "Impossible. These species do not interact in nature. They could not have formed social connections." "Watch this," said Sophie, age 10. She tapped a rhythm on her glass box. Immediately, a small blue creature in a nearby box tapped back the same rhythm. Then a furry 6-legged creature joined in. Soon dozens of young aliens were tapping in unison. "They're talking," Jackson realized. The human kids taught them how to communicate. Emma looked up at Jackson with pleading eyes. "Please don't leave them. They've been helping us stay brave. We have to help them too." Jackson made a decision that would change galactic history. He activated his communication device. "Captain Chen," he said, "we've got a problem. The kids won't leave without the other children." "All of them." Sarah's voice crackled through the device. "How many others?" Jackson looked around the laboratory, counting boxes. About 300 alien children from dozens of different species. There was silence on the communication channel for a moment. Then Sarah's voice came back, firm and determined. "Bring them all home, Jackson. Every single one." Dr. Kethvar stared in shock as the human soldiers began opening every box in his laboratory. "You cannot do this. These subjects represent years of research. Some of them are from species the Council has never studied before." Jackson turned to face the alien scientist. His face was hard as stone. "Doctor," he said quietly, "you put children in cages and called it science. You're lucky we don't put you in a cage and see how you like it." As hundreds of young creatures were freed from their glass prisons, they all gravitated toward the 12 human children. Somehow, in just 1 week, these human kids had become the emotional center that held all the others together. Dr. Kethvar watched his life's work being destroyed, and finally began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to fix it now. The cargo bay of the Retribution had been transformed into something Captain Sarah Chen had never seen before. 300 young creatures from dozens of different worlds huddled together in small groups. But in the center of it all were 12 human children, moving from group to group like tiny ambassadors. Sarah watched through the observation window as Emma, the 8-year-old with blonde hair, sat next to a creature that looked like a purple hedgehog. The alien child was shaking with fear, but Emma was gently stroking its spines and humming a lullaby. Somehow the alien understood that this was meant to be comforting. "Captain," Dr. Kim said, joining Sarah at the window, "I've never seen anything like this. The human children are acting as emotional support for all the others." Sarah nodded. In the past 6 hours, she had watched her crew work with the children to set up sleeping areas, distribute food, and provide basic medical care. But the most important healing was being done by the 12 human kids themselves. Tommy, the 6-year-old, with his stuffed bear, was teaching a group of small crystalline creatures how to play a clapping game. The aliens couldn't make the same sounds, but they found ways to participate. Their crystal bodies chimed like bells when they touched each other. Marcus, age 12, had appointed himself protector of the smaller children. He moved through the cargo bay like a guardian angel, making sure everyone had food and water. When he found a tiny blue creature that seemed sick, he immediately called for Dr. Kim. "What's wrong with this one?" Marcus asked, cradling the alien child carefully. Dr. Kim scanned the creature with her medical equipment. "It's dehydrated and showing signs of severe stress. But Marcus, this isn't even close to human biology. I'm not sure how to help it." "It needs its family," Marcus said with certainty. "They all do." Meanwhile, in the research vessel's laboratory, Dr. Kethvar sat in shock. His life's work lay in ruins around him. Empty glass boxes lined the walls like broken dreams. Lieutenant Commander Jackson stood guard while the alien scientist processed what had happened. "I don't understand," Kethvar said, his voice hollow. "The young of most species adapt to separation within days. They accept new situations quickly. Why didn't these subjects follow the same pattern?" Jackson looked at the alien with disgust. "Because you don't understand what you were studying. You saw children as test subjects instead of living beings with feelings. But the research showed that many species are naturally solitary," Kethvar protested. "They don't form social bonds. Separation should not have caused distress." "Then your research was wrong," Jackson said flatly. "Because every kid in that cargo bay is traumatized. Even the ones you claimed were naturally solitary." Dr. Yilnith, Kethvar's assistant, entered the laboratory carrying a tablet full of data. She looked confused and worried. "Doctor," she said, "I've been analyzing the communication patterns the human subjects developed. They didn't just talk to each other. They created a universal language that worked across species barriers." Kethvar took the tablet and studied the data. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about interspecies communication. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These are species that have never encountered each other in nature. Some of them don't even have vocal cords. How could they develop a shared language?" "The humans taught them," Yilnith explained. "They used basic gestures, sounds, and patterns that could be adapted by any species. Within days, all the subjects were communicating with each other." Jackson leaned forward. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," Kethvar said slowly, "that the human children did something we thought was scientifically impossible. They created social bonds across genetic lines that should not exist." On the Retribution, Sarah was learning the same thing from her own observations. She entered the cargo bay to check on the children and found herself in the middle of what could only be described as a massive interspecies family. Lisa, the 14-year-old, with red hair, was reading a story to a group of mixed alien children. She had found a way to tell the story using gestures and sound effects that every species could understand. The alien children listened with rapt attention, their various eyes and sensory organs focused on her. "What story are you telling?" Sarah asked. "The Three Little Pigs," Lisa replied. "But I changed it so the wolf isn't scary. I made him lonely instead, and the pigs invite him to live with them." Sarah realized that Lisa had instinctively modified the story to be less frightening for traumatized children. She wasn't just entertaining them, she was helping them heal. In another corner, Sophie and Ryan were teaching a group of alien children how to play simple games. The aliens couldn't run the same way humans did, but they had found ways to adapt the games for different body types. A snake-like creature was excellent at tag because it could move in directions the others couldn't predict. But it was little Anna, age 7, who was doing something truly remarkable. She was sitting with a creature that Dr. Kim had identified as coming from a species known for being completely antisocial. The aliens lived alone their entire lives and never interacted with their own kind except to reproduce. Yet here was this young alien, leaning against Anna while she sang softly. The creature's body language showed complete trust and contentment. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked Dr. Kim. "I think," Dr. Kim said carefully, "that we've been wrong about a lot of things. Maybe these species only become antisocial as adults. Maybe their young are naturally social, but we never saw it because we never observed them interacting with other species." Sarah thought about this. Human understanding of alien psychology was limited. Most first contact situations involved adult aliens, not children. Maybe the capacity for friendship and bonding was universal among young creatures, regardless of species. Dr. Kethavar reached the same conclusion as he reviewed his data. The evidence was overwhelming. Every young creature in his laboratory had responded positively to the social interaction initiated by the human children. Species that were supposedly incompatible had formed strong emotional bonds. "We have to report this to the council," Dr. Yilneth said. "Report what?" Kethvar asked bitterly. "That our fundamental understanding of interspecies psychology is wrong? That we've been torturing children for research that was based on false assumptions?" Jackson watched the alien scientist struggle with the implications of his discovery. "You could start by admitting that taking children from their families is wrong, no matter what species they are." Kethvar looked up at the human soldier. "Your species fascinates me." The human subjects could have focused only on their own survival. Instead, they chose to help others even when it provided no benefit to themselves. "That's what humans do," Jackson said. "We protect children, all children. It doesn't matter if they're our own species or not." Back on the Retribution, Sarah was dealing with a new problem. Word of the rescue had spread through space faster than she expected. Her communication system was receiving messages from dozens of species across the galaxy. The first message came from the Zephyrian Empire. Their ambassador's image appeared on Sarah's screen, showing a tall, elegant being with silver skin. "Captain Chen," the ambassador said, "we have received reports that you rescued Zephyrian children from a council research vessel. Is this true?" Sarah looked at her crew. They had not expected this kind of attention so quickly. "Yes," she replied. "We rescued all the children, human and alien." The ambassador's expression changed to something that might have been relief. "Captain, the council told us that our children were participating in a beneficial educational program. We were not informed that they had been taken against their will." "They were in cages," Sarah said bluntly. "All of them, being studied like laboratory animals." The ambassador was quiet for a moment. "We would like to arrange for the return of our children immediately." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "But I should warn you, they've been through trauma. They're going to need careful treatment." Similar messages came from other species. The Crystalline Collective wanted their children back. The Furry Federation demanded answers about why their young had been taken. The Snake People Empire threatened war against the Galactic Council. But the most interesting message came from a species Sarah had never heard of before. The creatures called themselves the Singing Ones, and they communicated entirely through musical tones. "Human Captain," their message said in broken standard language. "Our children sing happy songs now. Before rescue, they sing sad songs always. How did your young teach our young to sing hope again?" Sarah realized that something unprecedented was happening. Species that barely talked to each other were now communicating because of what the children had experienced together. Dr. Kethavar was facing the same reality on his ship. The Galactic Council was demanding answers about why he had lost his research subjects. But he was beginning to understand that the real research had been happening in the interactions between the children, not in his sterile observations. Dr. Yilneth said, "What do we tell the Council?" Kethvar looked at the empty laboratory that had once been his pride. For the first time in his career, he questioned whether scientific knowledge was worth the cost in suffering. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that we have learned something more important than we ever expected. We tell them that the capacity for compassion may be universal among young creatures." 6 months after the rescue, the Galactic Council chambers were fuller than they had been in decades. Representatives from over 200 species sat in the curved seats, all facing the center where Dr. Kethvar stood trial for crimes against sentient children. But this was not the most important event happening that day. In a smaller chamber nearby, Captain Sarah Chen sat at a table with 12 human children and their families. Around them were dozens of alien families who had come to thank the humans for saving their young. Tommy, now 7 years old, still carried his stuffed bear. But he also carried something new, a small crystal that chimed like music when he touched it. It was a gift from the crystalline collective children he had befriended during his captivity. "Captain Sarah," Tommy said, tugging on her sleeve. "When can we visit our friends again?" Sarah looked around the room at the alien families. The snake-like parents coiled protectively around their young. The crystalline beings chimed soft, happy songs. The furry creatures groomed each other affectionately. All of them kept looking at the human children with what could only be described as gratitude. "Soon, Tommy," Sarah promised. "Very soon." The changes had started immediately after the rescue. When the first alien parents arrived to collect their children, they expected to find traumatized, damaged young ones. Instead, they found children who had learned to communicate across species barriers and had formed friendships they didn't want to leave behind. The Zephyrian ambassador's child, a tall silver being named Kiln, refused to board his family's ship without saying goodbye to Emma, the human girl who had taught him hand games. The two children had created their own language of gestures that worked despite their completely different biology. "Father," Kiln had said in his musical voice, "the human child Emma saved my mind when the dark thoughts came. I must honor her always." Similar scenes played out with every family reunion. Alien children spoke of the human kids as heroes who had protected them and kept them sane during the worst experience of their lives. The political implications were immediate and far-reaching. The Furry Federation, which had never had diplomatic relations with humans, opened trade negotiations within a week of getting their children back. Their young ones wouldn't stop talking about Marcus, the human boy who had shared his food and protected the smaller children. The Crystalline Collective, known for being isolationist, invited human musicians to perform at their most sacred ceremonies. Their children had learned about music from Tommy and his bear, and the adults wanted to understand this sound art that had brought their young such comfort. Even the Snake People Empire, historically hostile to warm-blooded species, sent gifts to the human colony of New Eden. Their child had been sick and dying until Anna, the 7-year-old human girl, had somehow convinced Dr. Kim to find the right treatment. But the most profound changes were happening. In the Galactic Council itself, Dr. Kethvar's trial had become less about punishment and more about understanding. As the evidence was presented, it became clear that the research program had been based on fundamentally flawed assumptions about child development across species. "The data shows," testified Dr. Yilneth, who had become the key witness, "that young beings from most species retain social bonding capabilities until they reach sexual maturity. The human children somehow activated these dormant social instincts in all the other subjects." The lead prosecutor, a dignified being from the judicial caste, asked the crucial question, "Are you saying that the capacity for interspecies friendship is natural among children?" "Yes," Yilneth replied. "The human subjects proved that young beings can form meaningful relationships across any genetic barrier, given the opportunity and proper encouragement." In the audience, alien parents who had gotten their children back nodded in agreement. They had seen the evidence with their own eyes. The council's senior judge, an ancient creature with wisdom accumulated over centuries, spoke slowly. "If this is true, then our understanding of interspecies relations needs fundamental revision." But the real revolution was happening outside the courtroom. Captain Sarah Chen had become something she never expected, a diplomat. Representatives from dozens of species were asking her to help establish new programs for interspecies cooperation. They wanted to understand how humans had achieved something that had been considered impossible. "Captain Chen," said the Melodic Republic's ambassador, "our children returned home singing human songs alongside their traditional melodies. They have created new music that combines both traditions. We would like to establish cultural exchange programs with human worlds." Sarah looked at the alien ambassador with amazement. "You want humans to teach your children?" "We want our children to learn together," the ambassador corrected. "Your species has shown us that cooperation across genetic lines is not only possible, but beneficial." The requests kept coming. The Aquatic Federation wanted to build joint schools where human and alien children could learn together. The Machine Collective, entirely artificial beings, wanted to understand how biological children had taught their young emotional concepts they had never experienced before. But it was the testimony of the children themselves that changed everything. When Lisa, the 14-year-old human girl, was asked to speak before the council, her words were broadcast across the galaxy. "The alien kids aren't different from us in any way that matters," she said, her young voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They get scared, they miss their families, they want to play and learn and be loved. When we were all trapped together, we didn't see different species. We just saw other kids who needed help." She paused, looking around at the hundreds of adult aliens listening to her. "You adults make everything complicated with your politics and your fears, but kids just see other kids. Maybe that's something you should think about." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, delegates from different species began to stand. Soon, the entire council was giving a standing ovation to a 14-year-old human girl who had spoken simple truth. Dr. Keithvar's sentencing was almost anticlimactic after that. He was stripped of his research credentials and ordered to serve community service working with traumatized children. But more importantly, the entire council research program was disbanded and replaced with ethical oversight committees that included child welfare experts from every species. The former research vessel Serenity's Edge was converted into something unprecedented, the first interspecies school in galactic history. Children from dozens of worlds would come there to learn together, protected by strict ethical guidelines and watched over by human teachers who understood that protecting the young was a sacred duty. 6 months after the rescue, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the converted school ship, watching children play in the common areas below. Human kids ran and laughed alongside aliens of every description. They had their own universal games now, their own mixed languages, their own traditions that belonged to no single species. Tommy was teaching a group of alien children how to take care of stuffed animals. Marcus was leading a mixed species team in a game that looked like soccer, but worked for kids with different body types. Emma was reading a story to an audience that included beings with eyes, echolocation, and electromagnetic senses, and somehow, they all understood her. Dr. Keithvar approached the observation window. He now wore the simple clothes of a caretaker rather than the elaborate robes of a research director. "Captain Chen," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you." Sarah looked at the alien who had once caged children for science. "Thank me for what?" "For showing me what I was too blind to see," Keithvar replied. "These children are not subjects to be studied. They are teachers, showing us how the galaxy could be if we learned to see past our differences." Sarah watched as Anna, the 7-year-old human girl, helped a struggling alien child with its lessons. The alien child was from a species that had been at war with humans just a year ago. Now their children were best friends. "Doctor," Sarah said, "you caged human children and called it research, but those children did something you never expected. They proved that love and kindness are universal languages." She turned to face the former scientist. "The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Keithvar looked down at the playing children. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure this never happens again," he said. "And I'm going to learn from them how to build the kind of galaxy they deserve." As the sun set on the school ship, children from across the galaxy gathered for evening meal. They sat in mixed groups, sharing food and stories and laughter. Human children had taught them that family wasn't about genetics. It was about caring for each other. And in that simple truth, the galaxy found a new way forward. The age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic childhood had begun.